Some wild Toronto Raptors trade news has dropped, as reportedly rival NBA executives are hoping. They're praying the Toronto Raptors have a little fire sale come this trade deadline as they want in on the assets the Raptors could potentially give up. So we'll discuss that, as well as 5 potential suitors have been named in a potential Gary Trent Jr. package. So we'll discuss those, as well as the Toronto Raptors getting some respect despite poor play as of late from a top 100 list from The Ringer. And Malachi Flynn's dad is out here calling out Toronto Raptors fans. So a lot of stuff to dive into. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here at the Raptors side, just breaking down the latest Toronto Raptors news. And folks, before we dive into anything, I do want to say, if you guys are interested in sports betting, if you guys are looking to get some of the best lines that you can, you're living in Canada, you want the best sports book, the best place you can go is CoolBet. They have lines for pretty well any sport, anything you want to bet on, right? Especially Toronto Raptors games. I think the Raptors are about to be on a little upswing. I said in the last game's post-game reaction, thought there were a lot of positives from the game against the Kings, and now, so the lines might be a little cheaper. They might be able to get some good deals on Toronto Raptors lines, and definitely with CoolBet, you'll be able to. And they end up winning. They end up having a little turnaround with their tough schedule, make some money, have a little bit of fun on the way. So definitely check out the link down below in our description. Sign up for CoolBet. Helps us out. You'll be entered into draw for potential giveaways we have coming up in the coming weeks. So benefits all around. You guys are the best for checking that out. But we have a lot of news we have to dive into. And the next thing we're taking a look at, or the first thing we're taking a look at, is 5 teams reportedly suitors for Gary Trent Jr. trade. Not 4 teams, 5 teams. But we had a Bleacher Report article come out and discuss the whole situation surrounding the Toronto Raptors now at this point. And, they're talking about how Gary Trent Jr. could likely be in a deal. And they named 5 potential suitors that could be en route for Gary if a deal does end up going down. And those teams are listed as the LA Lakers, the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Miami Heat. All could be interested in Gary Trent Jr. According to Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report, with the way he's been talking to NBA insiders and NBA executives. So that's fairly interesting. As we've known the Lakers, they've been desperate to try and land Gary Trent Jr. ever since the Toronto Raptors got him. Maybe even before the Toronto Raptors got him. We've been really locked in on the rumors surrounding Gary Trent Jr. ever since we acquired him. But, they're always trying, it seems like every second month, the Lakers are trying to squeak their name in as, oh, maybe we can trade Dennis Schroeder for Gary Trent Jr. Oh, maybe we can get Nick Nurse and then recruit Gary Trent Jr. There's been wild rumors about Gary Trent Jr. going to the Lakers ever since we've acquired him. And obviously it makes sense for them. They need some shooting in their backcourt. And, the Toronto Raptors, the reason Gary Trent Jr. could be a part of a trade is we don't have the money to potentially give him. He doesn't fit our long-term future. Consistently, Masai Ujiri and executives on the Raptors, when they're interviewed, they don't really bring up Gary's name in terms of adding him as a core piece, the way they talk about Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes. So, the Lakers are the first team that was sort of named by Bleacher Report, and they could be a potential suitor. Now, what would I accept as a Raptors fan for a potential Gary Trent Jr. trade? I'm at least getting one of those unprotected Lakers picks in the future, and definitely a solid player coming back. Now, Talen Horton-Tucker, the guy Masai Ujiri is loved. It's no longer on the Lakers roster, but that's they don't really have any other assets that I'd be too intrigued in. Austin Reeves maybe, but maybe we give a couple assets like a Gary Trent Jr. and Boucher, and then the unprotected picks from the LA Lakers. And while I want the Toronto Raptors to win now, I don't want us to tank at this point. Those unprotected Lakers picks, given LeBron's age, given AD's injury history, and they have some ugly contracts on the books, the LA Lakers could be really bad. So if we can get a couple of unprotected picks from LA, I wouldn't be opposed to it, even though I'm not in the camp of trading our star boy Gary Trent Jr. So that's one, the main potential suitor that people have been sort of talking about. But there's other teams listed on in these names, as the Suns are an interesting name that's been brought up, as they've been trying to trade away Jay Crowder there for a long while. They have some young pieces, some young assets they could move in a potential Gary Trent Jr. trade. I feel like if it's for the Suns, we'd want a big back. They have some guys, maybe Bismack Biyombo, even though he's a smaller center. They have some guys in the front court. I don't think we get DeAndre Ayton, but you never know. You never know if how Ayton's really feeling down there with the Phoenix Suns. But probably a Jay Crowder, maybe one of their bigs, right, could be coming in return. But the other team that's a big name that was on this list is the Golden State Warriors, who big rumors came out about them a couple of weeks ago about potentially willing to give up Jonathan Kuminga, Wiseman, in a potential trade for a player that can have an impact on their team right now. And if the Toronto Raptors do go in the direction of going young and maybe not going all out to compete this season, Kuminga would be a player I would be very invested in. I'd love to acquire, and even James Wiseman, take a flyer on him. I don't think his trade value is that high at this point, right? I'd love those two young assets coming back. And then if we can get a player, that might, obviously salaries have to match, coming in for Gary Trent Jr., I wouldn't mind that coming back from the Golden State Warriors. As for the other teams, the Atlanta Hawks and Miami Heat, personally, I don't see the Toronto Raptors trading Gary to a conference rival. The Hawks, the Heat, they're going to be teams that we're fighting with in playoff position. If Hunter's maybe coming back from the Hawks, but I doubt they'd trade him. He's on a pretty solid contract at this point. Tyler Hero, I doubt that's coming back from the Heat, right? I don't know what these teams could potentially offer. Maybe a Clint Capella for Gary Trent Jr. trade, or even an Okongwu, right? And then we get some extra assets on top of it. Some Raptors fans might be intrigued by that, but let me know, given all these 5 teams, who you'd want to see the Toronto Raptors make a potential trade for. But the next thing we're taking a look at is rival NBA executives want the Raptors to tank. They want the Toronto Raptors to blow up this roster, as the Raptors have a lot of key assets, a lot of guys with a lot of value, and if the Toronto Raptors are looking to move in a different direction with their roster, a lot of teams could benefit from acquiring some of our guys, and that's conveyed in the report coming from Eric Pincus, a Bleacher Report. They're saying Fred VanVleet and Trent can opt out of their contract and explore unrestricted free agency, and rival teams are hopeful the Raptors will fall off and focus on building a new core around second-year forward Scotty Barnes. The number of teams interested in their players is too long to list. So he went on to list, right? He went on to list 5 teams interested in just Gary Trent Jr. So if we're talking guys like Fred VanVleet, especially a Pascal Siakam, I'd imagine every single team in the NBA would be interested in some of our star guys, OG Anunoby as well. So rival NBA teams, they're hoping we blow it up. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't see the Toronto Raptors sort of shifting directions on the core, especially when it comes to Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, and Scotty Barnes. I just don't see it occurring. Now, I have made my predictions. I have made my bets that I do think a trade will be made come this trade deadline. I've locked that in. My ego's on the line, and we're trying to get some futures coming from CoolBet as we inch closer and closer to the trade line. If you're signed up, you'll be able to bet on whether not Gary Trent Jr. gets traded or any of the players. But yeah, I think a deal is going to end up going down. However, I don't think it's going to be anything major. I think the most major deal we'll potentially see is a Gary Trent Jr. trade, as been discussed, or at the start of this podcast. So I don't know. Do I think rival NBA executives are going to be landing a cheap deal for OG Anunoby or something like that? No chance in heck. Right, the Toronto Raptors just they declined an offer for Shaedon Sharpe, basically, a lottery pick, Josh Hart, and some key young players, Nasir Little and a couple guys from the Portland Trailblazers this offseason. So I don't imagine, given OG Anunoby's performance, his youth, the way he fits the Toronto Raptors' vision, we'd be willing to give up a guy like him, or Pascal Siakam is playing like a top 15 player. And that segues pretty solidly into our next topic, as the Toronto Raptors have been getting respect in a top 100 list from The Ringer, as they named Toronto's Pascal Siakam as not a top 14 player, but 14th in the NBA. And even the Raptors have been struggling. I feel like the Raptors got a lot of credit, got a lot of respect from The Ringer on this front. And we can take a look at where they had their guys. They had Pascal Siakam at 14th in the NBA. They had him ahead of guys like Zion, a lot of other NBA stars out there. They call him a do-it-all player who's expanded his game every single year for the Toronto Raptors and has become a face for face of the franchise in Toronto. So, they showed some love to Pascal, putting him at 14th, which I think is exactly the right position he deserves to be in right now. If he was healthier, maybe you can even push him up a little bit higher, but the way he's been scoring efficiently, rebounding, playing elite defense as he always does, and his improved playmaking, deserves all the credit in the world. I like that he's getting the light shown on him a little bit. But the guy that got the second most recognition, surprisingly to some maybe, is OG Anunoby, who is, quote, an all-world defender, putting on the clamps of opposing stars and flashing and broadening an offensive game of his own. Right, OG Anunoby, he was ranked 41st in the NBA. It was put about 80 by ESPN's list. So The Ringer, they put him in a very reasonable position, 41st best player in the NBA, which is really, really nice there. And they put Fred VanVleet, even though he hasn't been that great this season, 60 or 58th, which, given his inefficiencies and given the way guys like Bill Simmons and guys over the ringer kind of criticize Fred VanVleet a bunch, I was happy to see him in the top 60. And he was an all-star last season. Definitely took a drop from last year. Definitely took a drop from the ESPN list, but an undeniable competitor with the instincts, range, and resolve to be a star in his own terms. And yes, the efficiency needs to be better for him to move up in this list, but I'm happy that he's still, in the top 60 at least, even with his struggles this season. And same with Scottie Barnes, even though he's been struggling immensely this year as well. Scottie Barnes, he ended up being 72nd on this list. Behind a couple guys, I'd like to see him higher, but given his performances of late, you can't have him too high. But a jumbo-sized playmaker capable of playing versatile role on both offense and defense, though he's still figuring out his place in Toronto. So usually when I do these lists, I criticize players that are put above our players. Franz Wagner ahead of Scottie Barnes still aggravates me as a Raptors fan, but I'm happy with this list, especially with how things have been going. I would have liked to see Gary Trent Jr. crack the top 100, like guys like Grant Williams and White, DJ, his name's slipping me. Guys on the Celtics cracked it over Gary. I'm not happy. I guess they're the first seed, so they deserve their respect, but I'm happy with this list. Toronto Raptors getting their respect from the ringer. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with any of these rankings. The final thing we're talking about is Malachi Flynn's dad calling out Toronto Raptors fans. Now, Eric Flynn, he's always out here on Raptors Facebook groups, giving his opinions, letting his takes be known. With LeVar Ball kind of falling off from recent years, Eric Flynn's trying to make his name in terms of up the ladder of NBA dads. But he's come out and basically said, Raptor Nation, have you ever considered, instead of bashing our players and coaches and organization, have you ever considered praying for our players and coaches and organization and their families? Because that is what I'm going to do. And you know what? We need to spread some positivity. I'm agreeing with Eric Flynn. Sure, it's fine to criticize and stuff, but the occasional bash is fine to motivate your team. But we gotta stay positive and hope this Raptor squad turns things around. So shout out to Eric Flynn, always giving some solid content on Facebook, and shout out to you guys for making this far in this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Sign up for Cool Bet, helps us out big time, and you guys are the best. I'm signing out. Cheers.